So brand new Dynamic CRM 2011 and very useful Dialogs. You know, the main differences, obviously, Dialogs have a user experience. And I want to drill down on this a little bit more. You can get some intuition about the difference in, you know, the way they work by examining some things like this in the design experience difference. So here's your workflow add step drop down. Here's what you see if you click the add step menu in a dialog, and there's a bunch of new stuff, some of it obvious, pages and prompts and responses. Those are the user experience constructs. But things like query CRM data and assign value, those are pretty interesting, get a lot of good use out of those. And then Link Child Dialog. Notice dialogs can both call child dialogs and they can start workflows. But notice a workflow can only start a child workflow. A workflow can't start a dialog because workflows, by definition, don't have a user experience. So they can't call something experience. Dialogs will always have, as you'll see, you cannot create a dialog without a user experience because you can't create it without a prompt and a response inside a page. So that's one way to get some intuition about the difference. Another is to contrast what you see on properties. So here's your workflow properties section. We looked at this earlier. Remember that? Scope and all that sort of thing. Here's dialogs. Notice dialog doesn't have anything like that. There's nothing automatic about dialogs. Okay. And it's got these things here. Input arguments, variables are the two new constructs that you'll see up at the top of the step editor, and we'll talk about those. Input arguments are used to pass values to child dialogs, and variables are used to, say, keep a running total of variables. We'll talk about that. But throughout a dialog, you can have a local variable or several local variables that can store values and have those values updated as the dialog proceeds. Here's the user experience. Just a little dialog that we use for having a conversation with customers about CRM upgrades. So there's your dialog name. Then you've got the page construct. Pages can have one or more prompts and responses. You can capture those values and do things with them. When you're working in the step editor, here's what it might look like. So you'll put a page, and within the page you'll put prompts and responses. You can query CRM data. That's a very powerful capability of dialogs. When I first started working with them, I had a hard time coming up with good examples for, you know, how you would do that, and now I find myself having a hard time writing a dialog that doesn't query CRM data, because you can always think of something you do to make the dialog a little bit more flexible, a little more dynamic, and queries is a good example of that. Input arguments, that's get passed from a parent dialog. Okay, and then variables for storing intermediate values. We'll see lots of good examples. So what would you use dialogs for? Well, if you ever find yourself, or sales reps, if you've got some process that has you asking the same questions over and over again, it's a good candidate for a dialogue. Scripted or guided conversations. Some people refer to guided selling. It's nicer to say guided selling than scripted selling, but in this context it might be the same thing. And like a regular workflow, you can do stuff with the information that you gather. So you can create CRM records, basically. Q&A process to simplify the creation of complex records. So you might have, you know, maybe there's some users who don't mind going directly into a goal record and just creating a goal, or, you know, a relatively complex opportunity form. But maybe outside sales reps or executives or whatever are in too much of a hurry for that. You just want a little dialogue, gather the basic information, and then have it create complex records for them. But I do want to show you how you do conditional branching within a dialog, because this is a very common thing. What you'll typically see is based on, so here's our first page up here, gather basic information, and depending upon what's the response, give somebody a yes/no response here. Notice in the next section I've got an if condition, and it branches if some condition is yes. So suppose in this case, they've got third-party products or add-ons. They say yes. Then I branch to another page that's going to say which ones. And it's not appropriate if they said no here, so I'd skip that. So you'll see that a lot. Okay, what I'm going to show you in this first demo is a real simple, this is not quite a hello world, it's a little bit more complex than a hello world dialogue, but it's a pretty straightforward dialogue. It shows the basic constructs. One pages, prompts, and responses, that is, and a really important piece of this is the importance of the response value data type. I'm going to show you something that I get bit by all the time. I forget to do this, and then I always kick myself for forgetting, but it happens. And then what I'm going to do is create a case record. So I'm going to select an account, and the scenario here is maybe somebody's going to create a case record that isn't necessarily a customer service rep, and we don't want them interacting directly with the case record. We just want a real simplified process that maybe the phone receptionist or somebody that doesn't have a lot of experience can just do this. And we also want to give them the opportunity to create another case record so they can do more than one at the same time, and that gives us an opportunity to show this how recursing works. I'll create this one from scratch. And let's work here and let's go to processes. Let's make a new dialog process. It's going to be a dialog. The entity that it's going to be written for is account. So the scenario here is I'm going to be on an account record, selected an account, okay, and I'm going to create a case record. So for that, and I'll be careful and call this create cases for account, because I'm going to give somebody the opportunity to create more than one. So let's start from scratch and do this here. The first thing you notice is there's no options for automatic here. I'm going to make this available as an on-demand, and I also want to make it available as a child process. I'll just check that in at first because I know that's going to be what I want. Then I'll minimize the process properties here. Then the very first thing that I'll do is come down here, select this row and click Add Step. So this one, don't need input arguments, don't need variables. I'll go ahead and click Add Step, and notice one of the things I can put here is a page. So I'm going to put my basic page UI down here. Gather information to create case. That's actually going to be the name of the dialog that pops up. You'll see. So the very first thing that I want to do, I don't need to know anything about the account because I'm on the account record. So this simplifies. We'll look at some queries in a minute to extend this, but for now, let's suppose really what I need is, if I'm thinking about the case record type, let's that up, and let's just get a new case record up there and see what's required of case. Figure out what type of information we want here. So let's get our dialog up, and then we can bounce back and forth. Okay, so here's my dialog. Here's the case record. So what do I need? Case, I need title and customer. Cases are easy because there's only two required fields. So the first thing that I want is, if I'm inside the page here, I want the title. So it says select this row and click Add Step. If I go to Add Step, notice the only thing I can put here, the only thing you can put on a page is a prompt and response. This has to do with what I said earlier about making sure you're in the right place. I needed to be here in order to do this. So let's go and click Set Properties, and now here's how we create a prompt and response. And this is going to be title of new case. Response type, I've got some options to choose from. I'm going to choose a single line of text here, and notice I've got data types. This is really important. This is what I mentioned earlier. I always sort of forget. I always use the default data type of text, but sometimes you don't want it to be text, and I'll show you an example of that in a minute. Single lines, text. Enter the title of the new case. I could put tip text in here if I want. Not do that for now. Statement label. This is going to be, I'll show you why I choose this. I want that statement label in this case, I want this to agree with the name of the field on the case record. I'm going to be real careful about that, and I'll show you why in a minute. It's really important to have some conventions and best practices for naming statement labels in dialogue, and I'll show you why in a minute. So we've got that. I don't need to ask for the customer. We're on the customer record. Remember, when we run this, we're going to already be on an account, and I'll show you how that plays out. But let's suppose I do want to fill in some other information, such as the case type and the case origin, these pick list fields. How do you do that? Case type, you've got question, problem, and request. So I'll put another add step in here. And if I'm on this prompt and response and I choose add step, I have the option to add another prompt and response. And let's call this case type, the same as the field name. And let's make this an option set. So this is going to be a pick list, just like the field on the case form that we want to fill in is. So I'll make this an option set, pick list. Being very careful and deliberate about that. But here's the key thing. I don't want to do this. Okay, what happens if I forget? I'll make this text. Now if I go back in there, you can see that once you specify the data type of the response type that's coming back, you cannot change. Okay, and I'll show you why it's important to not have that be text in a minute. But for now, let me leave it as text to sort of show you why you don't want it as text. I'll add another one. This is going to be case origin. I can type it before or after I go in here. The statement label is going to be the same as what's out there in the step editor there. This will be a pick list, but now I'm going to be careful and do this the right way. This should be an integer value, and then I want to give it values here. I want this to match up with the values that I have out on the case record. So this will be email, I believe, if I do this in the right way. And I want this to have a value of 1. I'll show you why I do that in a second. Phone, I want this to have a value of 2. You can specify those values. And web, I want this to have a value of 3. So I've got this defined as an integer. It's case origin. Okay, let's see if I got that right. Let's go look at the case form. Case origin, phone, email, web. I think I might have got that backwards. I want to go fix that. So phone. And the second one is what I want to be email. The important thing is that the values need to match the option set values for the pick list you want to update. You'll see why in a second. Okay, and let's go into case type. Case type is question, problem, request, I believe. So I'll add these response values. Request is 3. But remember, I've got the wrong data type there. So I know that that's not going to work. Let's suppose that's all we need. I've got the case title. I've asked for case type, case origin. So that's all the user input we need. I can minimize the page. And then the step that I want to add after that is what? I want to create a record. So with this page selected, now I can put something down here that goes outside the page block so I can create the record, and the record that I want to create is the case. So here's where I've got the information, my sort of post dialogue processing. I'll call this new case, and it's important again. This is kind of my evolved standard for this, and I'll show you why. It's because when I refer to this later in the workflow, it'll be obvious what this thing is. This is the new case that's created by this. So here's the new case record, and what do I want the title to be? Well, I put the cursor in the title field. I go over here to look for, and I go down here to local values, and there's case title. That's why I was really careful. Remember I said you want to be careful about those statement labels because these are essentially variables that you can use here. So I want case title, response text, that's the text that comes back, to go update this. Customer, what's customer? Well, it's account. We started on the account record, so I know we're going to have it there, so I just click add. Boom, we put the account in as the customer. Case origin, phone, email, web. Well, if I go over here in the look for, my case origin, I was very careful to define that response value as an integer, and that's what it needs to be in order to update a pick list in Dynamic CRM. Those are integer values, and they have to match. That's why I was careful to do that 1, 2, 3. But look what happens if I go to case type. I go over here to look for, and I go to my case type. Uh-oh, what do I do here? See the problem here? It's the wrong data type. That's text. I need to define that as an integer, because when I first started working with this, it's not like anybody tells you this, right? Where do you find that? You think you have to do like a conditional block, depending upon what you selected, and then go and hardwire 3 update things in a row. But you don't have to do that. Let's save and close that for now and go fix the problem that I had on my page with the case type. So I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to add it right after case title. So now I add another step, prompt and response. This is going to be case type, and here this time I'll get the data type right. So it's going to be an option set with a value of integer, specify case type, and remember you got to do those values right too, step like I'm going to do here. So now I can go back, I've got my dialog, my pages in prompts and response correct, and now I come back into case type, select that, come over to here, look at case type. Since it's now an integer, I can do the option set value in there, and then we're good to go. The owner, if I don't supply something for this, it's going to be whoever's running this workflow will fill it in. Notice it's not required here, which looks kind of funny, but that's because of the rules of workflows and dialogues. On-demand workflows and all dialogues run in the context of the user that's running them, and that will be whoever's running this. But suppose I wanted to be a little careful about this. Maybe I always wanted it, if the phone receptionist is doing the intake and I still wanted it assigned to the owner of the account, then this might be a better way to go. Follow up by, how about process execution time? Not that that's necessarily how you do it, but it shows that you have this process local value and associated variables in a dialog as well as a workflow. Save and close. So now what have I done? I've gathered the information. I've created the case record. But now how about I ask them if they want to create another case record? Well, how about this? If I put it in here as the very last prompt and response, then I can get this thing down to one page rather than, I could have another page added after this thing, but it also works if you do it here. So watch what happens. I can say go to the case origin, add one more prompt and response. This is going to be a yes, no. If they say, this is going to be an option set radio buttons, might be a little bit more convenient here. Okay, and I'll just define this one as text. I'm going to be careful here and start with no, and I'm going to then say yes. And the reason I do that is because in dynamic CRM, if you ever look at any of those bit fields, so-called booleans that have no's and yeses, no's are 0 and yeses are 1. So that's the way I normally do this, just to, who knows, it might matter someday, so that's the way I'll do this. In this scenario here, I'll show you why I can go ahead and leave this as text. So I'm going to, that yes, no value is going to be text. Minimize the page. I create the new case record, then let's add a condition. I'm going to check what they said. If create another case, response label equals yes. This makes it a little bit more readable to me rather than saying response value equals 1. Right? I can say response label equals yes, because they can't, it's a pick list. They can't, just type something. It's going to be highly validated, right? If they say yes, then what do I want to do? Add step, Link Child Dialog, and the thing that I want to link to is create cases for account. But why can't I see it here? You got to save it first. Then the fact that it's been exposed as a child process, then it kicks in. You don't have to activate it, you just have to save it. Okay, so now we can call this thing recursively. If they said yes, I can add, I've selected the if block here, so I can add a default action. They say anything else, we're just going to stop the thing. Stop dialog. All done. Okay, so now let's save and close and run this. Make sure it does what we think it does. Go ahead and activate it. So now, go to service. And we go to, let's go to accounts. Select an account on the grid, and I want to start a dialog. Remember, I wrote that dialog for account. So here's my create cases for account. Run it, and here's the dialog process. Okay, so I'm going to enter the title of the new case. Here's my two pick lists. And so from A store, I'll make this a problem. And let's suppose it's reported by email. And let's go ahead and create another one. Make sure that part works. So this is a request. And this is by phone. And no. And then we're all done. Okay, let's see how synchronous this is. I go into A store. Now I look for the cases that are available. Okay, so here's a request from A store. Here's request and problem. So you can see that those get created right away. All the values get appropriately substituted in here. Here's the request. So it looks like I got those values right. So you can see how that all gets updated. So that's your basic process. Now,